Question 19. The table gives the lengths of some rivers in Western Canada. Churchill, Fraser, Mackenzie, North Saskatchewan, and the Thalon. It says write a ratio in fractional form to compare the length of the Churchill River and Mackenzie River. The Churchill River and the Mackenzie River. So we're going to go 1608 compared to 1800. This is going to be the Churchill compared to the Mackenzie. ACK. All right. Express the ratio as a fraction in lowest terms. Well, there we are as a fraction, but it's not in lowest terms. Now, here's where a really cool divisibility rule trick comes into play. If you know your divisibility rules for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., you know that for 4, we need the last 2 digits to be divisible by 2 twice in a row, so that works there. If you think of this as being 100, it works there. But the divisibility for rule for 8 is if the whole number can be divided by 2 3 times in a row. So mentally, I can do this. I'll just start with 1608. If I divide that by 2, I get 804. If I divide that by 2, I get 402. And if I can do it one more time, which I can, I get 201. So 1608 divided by 8 is 201. If I do the same thing with 1800, divided by 2, I get 900. This is divisibility rules for 8. Divided by 2 again, I get 450. And divided by 2 again, I get 225. So this, when divided by 8, equals 225. You can check it out with a calculator if you want, but I'm sure it works. Now, in lowest terms, is that in lowest terms? Well, I have to look at it again now and say, well, what are my other divisibility rules? What could possibly work for this? It ends in a 1. But then if I think back to when I said, what's divisible by 3? And the rule is, if the sum of the digits add up to a number that's divisible by 3. Well, let's look at 201. 2 plus 1 equals 3. That's divisible by 3. So 201 is, so that works. Hopefully 225 is. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 5 is 9. 9 is divisible by 3. So therefore 225 is, it works. And 201 divisible by 3, or divided by 3, excuse me, is 67. Is that right? 67? Yes, I think so. 67. And 225 divided by 3 is 75. Is that right? Yes, it is. It's 75. And now I have to stop and ask myself, is there anything else possibly divisible into either one of those? And since my divisibility rule for 3 does not work for 6 plus 7, because that's 13, I'm pretty sure that is as low as it goes. So for answer A, the lowest term fraction is 67 to 75. That means for every 67 meters of the Churchill, there are 75 meters, sorry, kilometers, not meters, of the Mackenzie. Question B. Let's erase all this stuff. Question B. I'll just take this and I'll erase it. Perfect. Question B says, write a ratio in decimal form to compare the length of the North Saskatchewan River, to the Fraser River. So the North Saskatchewan River is 1,392 kilometers, and the Fraser River is 1,368. They're very close in distance. It says, express the ratio as a decimal correct to the nearest hundredth. Okay, well, let's not work with anything crazy here. Let's just go and take our calculator out and say, how do I change this to a decimal? Well, I take my numerator and I divide it by my denominator, and I get an answer that says 1.017. But it says to the nearest hundredth, so I only need the first 2 decimal places, but I'm going to use that third one to round it up. So the answer was 1.017. But since it's to the nearest hundredth, I'm going to make this one here 1.02. What does that mean? Well, we'll talk about that in just a second. Let's look at C for a second. The calculator keying sequence that compares the length of the Thalon River to the Churchill represents this. So 904 compared to 1608. And if we do that division, we get this answer, 0.5621, blah, 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 blah. Write your answer to the nearest hundredth. So that would be right there. And what comparison statement can you make about the length of the 2 rivers? Well, if we make this comparison, is it fair to say that the Thalon River is 56% the length of the Churchill River? And the answer is yes. We can say that this converts into, if I was thinking about, I got 904 on a test at a 1608, what was my percentage? Well, it was 56%. So I can say that the Thalon River is 56% the length of the Churchill River. Is that right? Yes. And I can also say up here, that this is kind of an interesting one, that the North Saskatchewan River, since 1 is actually 100%, 1.02 is actually 102%. So I can say it's 2% bigger or longer than the Fraser River. So that's kind of a neat way of looking at ratios to percents, comparing two numbers together to figure out how much longer or shorter or how much bigger one number is in comparison to another.